Hey guys, Mark Brown here. I am the Chief Demo Pilot and Director of Marketing for Quest Aircraft Company. I'm here in front of American Kodiak, one of the Kodiak dealers, our Kodiak dealer here for the state of Texas. I'm here with their airplane, and today we're going to do a walk around of the Kodiak 100 Series 2. So we're going to start up here with the very front of the plane, the propeller. So what we have here is a 96-inch Hartzell four-bladed prop. What makes this prop so great is the clearance it provides from the ground. So it's got 19 inches of prop clearance. The Kodiak was designed as a modern-day bush airplane. It was designed in the late 1990s, early 2000s, because there was a need. There was no airplane that ran on jet fuel that had a turboprop engine that was really designed and built to go off airport and into the bush, if you will. So everything around the Kodiak is designed with that mindset. This is the best off airport bush plane made, but it's also, you can think of it kind of like a Range Rover or a Toyota Land Cruiser with wings. It's a very refined luxury SUV, but it has the brawn and the beef to go off airport. So that 19 inches of clearance is extremely important. It obviously is fully feathering reversible prop, so you can use the reverse thrust to help you stop even quicker on takeoff, or on landing, excuse me. Coming back from there, you'll notice this air intake is very high off the ground. Again, done for the purpose of off-airport type operations. It also cants up just a little bit, and again, that's for FOD on takeoff and landing, so FOD doesn't come in. We actually, inside of the takeoff of the air intake, is what we call the inertial separator, which is a way for the airflow to actually come in the engine, go down, and then it has to come back up. So in cases where we're landing on very loose gravel type strips or flying through heavy precipitation or ice, that way the airflow does, or the FOD goes out the bottom of the plane, and the air is the only thing that can make that turn. The engine we have behind this cowling is the PT6-34A, or -34, excuse me. It creates 750 horsepower. One of the reasons that we picked this engine, number one, it had the horsepower rating that we needed for the airplane. Number two is it's one of the most widely produced PT6 engines. So from that standpoint, there's a whole lot of them out there flying. There's a whole lot of parts availability for them. They're very reliable. So what it allows is the cost of operations of the airplane to be significantly lower than any comparable single engine PT6. One of our first customers was humanitarian groups, and obviously they count all their pennies because they work on mostly donations. So a low cost of operations is very important for them, and of course for your average owner-operator or commercial operator that might use the Kodiak, the lower the operating costs, the higher they can their profit margin will be. Coming back from there, these are exhaust stacks built by Frakes Aviation here in Cleburne, Texas. They're designed for the Kodiak. They give it the right, they actually add a little bit of thrust to it, and they don't impede performance, so they're great stacks specific to this airplane. Moving back, we'll get to the landing gear, the nose gear. So the nose gear on the Kodiak and the landing gear in general is really quite impressive, and it's one of the things that makes the Kodiak very unique among its single-engine turboprop competitors. This has the large tire option. So both the mains and the nose wheel have the large 29-inch tires. The nose fork all the way up, if you took this cowling off, it's really impressive just how much structure and rigidity there is in the nose gear. As you can see just by looking at this torque tube and just how thick it is, it's really quite impressive. So one of the things that we say, this isn't an FAA regulation or anything like that, but the gear is rated to a 9-inch stump load. So in essence, the gear should be able to hit a 9-inch tree stump and I'll be okay. which is pretty impressive if you think of just how tall a 9-inch tree stump would be. Normally it would shear the gear off of a lot of airplanes. Moving a little bit further back, I'll open the engine cowling here so we can have a look at what's inside. So it looks pretty standard to a typical PT6 installation. What you looking up here, so the gold is the 300 amp starter generator. That's standard equipment on every Kodiak. We have an alternator here. We have, this airplane has the optional AC, so it's an engine driven compressor that we have here. Here we have the oil cooler, so that's what this NACA duct is for. This cools the oil obviously going to and from the engine. This is our brake fluid reservoir, so it's about the only hydraulics on this plane besides the TKS anti-icing system. Close that up. The great thing about the Kodiak from a maintenance standpoint is all the maintenance on this plane is very easy and very, relatively speaking, cheap. So one of the design criteria of the plane was that a lot of these humanitarian missions and operations actually have pilot mechanics flying this plane, and they're flying into the most remote regions of the world in Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, the Amazon, Africa, places like that. So the airplane was designed obviously not to break, but if it does break, it had to be very simple and relatively inexpensive to fix by a pilot mechanic with a set of spares, because if you're stranded in a bush strip in Papua New Guinea, you might be there for a couple days waiting on another Kodiak to come deliver the parts. So everything is overbuilt on the plane, and the things that do tend sometimes to break, they're very easy to fix with just one person with a set of tools. So again, that makes the cost of operations even lower just with that mindset and the fact that there's no life-limited parts on the plane. So the Kodiak is, as a whole, rated to about 20,000 hours. Obviously that will get extended as the Kodiak lineage lives on. But the great thing with no life-limited parts is nothing has to be torn off the plane and tested at various cycle intervals or time intervals. So from a maintenance standpoint, pretty much every annual is very similar. There's not an annual that you'll get in a couple years down the road where, for instance, you have to take the landing gear off, send it out, it takes a couple weeks to get back, it's very expensive. The Kodiak doesn't have anything like that. So yeah, moving over to the co-pilot side, the right side of the plane, we'll open up this engine cowling just to have a look and see what's in here. So you can see a little bit more on this side. What we have here is the bleed air muffler system. The rest of this, we have the FCU and all the engine components. There's 2 batteries in every Kodiak. I don't know, it might be hard to see, but if you look down here, you can see just how robust the engine firewall and engine mount is. But there's a carry-through cross tube here on the engine mount, and that's on every Kodiak. So one of the things that oftentimes has to be done when you put an airplane on floats is you have to add a whole bunch of additional you have to add a whole bunch of additional structure and components to make it float equipped. The great thing about the Kodiak is every Kodiak comes off the line ready to be put on floats. So when you put the Kodiak on Aeroset floats, there's really no additional aerodynamic or structural upgrades that you have to do, which is pretty unique to this platform. Obviously, one of our co-founders and the designer of the Kodiak was Tom Hamilton. Tom Hamilton's also widely known as the Aeroset guy. And of course, the 6650 and 6750 floats are certified for the airplane, the Aeroset floats. Carbon fiber floats, really impressive. It makes in my opinion, the best seaplane out there off the water time is at full gross weight, something like 20 to 25 seconds. Close this up. So moving back, there's not a whole lot on this side, but I will point out right here we have a lot of people ask what this light is for. Well, this particular airplane is equipped with the TKS anti-icing system. And this light is your ice light, so when you're flying at night, you can turn that on. It shines a bright light on the leading edge of the wing. And of course, you can see if you're building ice or not at night. You can see the TKS system here on the leading edge. So it's this titanium. There's tiny little microscopic holes all along here. Pretty interesting thing is we have TKS on our struts as well as our wheel fairings. A lot of people wonder why. There's kind of two reasons. These are obviously big, large surfaces that will build ice in heavy icing conditions. They're also airfoils, so technically they're a type of a lifting surface. So we have to obviously have ice come off and cannot build on any lifting surface of the plane. So as we work out, the wing design of the Kodiak is probably the most unique feature set of the airplane. It's what during R&D, during our developmental process of the plane, we spent probably the most time and money on. And what makes the wing so unique is a couple reasons. Number one, it's a high coefficient of lift wing, which basically means it's a very thick wing. So it produces a lot of lift, which is part of the reason why it's such a great STOL plane. It also allows the plane to build ice and be very safe in ice. We did icing testing to various levels of ice buildup. The Kodiak never was in dire straits. It was never, falling out of the sky like some other airplanes are known to do, from piston all the way up to multi-engine airplanes. So you can get a lot of contaminants on a high lift wing and you still create a lot of lift. The really unique part about the Kodiak wing is above me here. So a lot of people notice, because the only real way to tell is what we call the discontinuous leading edge. So the discontinuous leading edge is the marker actually for a different airfoil which starts here at rib 13 and goes outboard. What makes this wing design so unique is it theoretically makes a unstallable wing. So on a straight wing airplane like the Kodiak, the stall starts at the wing root, works its way out, and then eventually gets to the tip. And anybody that's ever flown an airplane or done flight training will know that when you stall an airplane, typically one wing drops before the other. And the only way to get out of it is by adding power and pushing the nose forward to get lift back on the wing. The Kodiak wing, what happens is in a flaps clean situation, so flaps 0, the stall will stop right here and this outboard wing will never lose lift. So if you notice, the outboard wing lines up perfectly with the aileron. So if you have lift going over this section of the wing, you have full aileron control through the stall. What that means is I can sit with a Kodiak with a power off situation or a 0 thrust rating. I can sit there with a stick all the way back in my belly and I have full aileron control through it. So the Kodiak will never drop a wing that's unrecoverable during a stall, which means during the most dangerous phases of flight, when you're slow speed, you always have aileron control. That was done for a number of reasons, but first and foremost is safety. We believe the Kodiak is, with its modern certification, 2007 Amendment 55 certification, is one of the safest airplanes. This wing obviously makes it even safer. So moving back inboard, a lot of people notice these flap tracks. So these flap tracks are really unique, and I like to point them out because it's one of the very obvious signs of just how robust and well built the Kodiak is. So if you notice, if you get up real close, these flap tracks don't have any weld marks in them. They're machined out of a solid block of aluminum for strength and quality efficiency, or quality control. So it's the strongest way to build a flap track. And as we all know, the flap tracks aren't particularly under a high stress load except when the flaps are out. So if the flaps are made this well, you can see how well everything else is made on the plane. There's 3 flap settings on a Kodiak. There's 10, 20, and 35 degrees. Every Kodiak takeoff is done with 20 degrees of flaps. Every Kodiak landing, well, you can do different landings, but recommended we typically land with full flaps at 35 degrees. One interesting thing that I like to point out is this is a pretty neat feature, especially for operators that are doing high load, low fuel type situations. So what this is a fuel dipstick. So I'm just going to break it free from its magnet. And as you can see here, there's different fuel levels. So if I push this up, right there, it stops. So if I look here, I have about 425 pounds of fuel in this wing. That's a really easy, accurate way for me to check the fuel load in the wing without having to crawl up on top, and it gives me a way to verify, because everything in flying is always double check. So obviously my avionics is going to tell me how much fuel I have, but I want to double check, and this is a very easy, simple way for me as a pilot to double check how much fuel this wing has. Moving down here to the landing gear, as I mentioned earlier, these are the 29-inch larger tire options. They look pretty small when you see the Kodiak, just because the Kodiak's such a big airplane, but you can see here it's a pretty substantial tire. The cool thing with the landing gear and the tires specifically is they were certified to a lower PSI. So one of the big problems with bush planes, or airplanes that have been adapted to be bush planes that maybe weren't designed that from the start, is the tire pressure tends to be very, you actually have a certified tire pressure range that you can be in. And a lot of those tires are too inflated. They're too much PSI in them. So when you get onto a soft strip like this, what'll happen is the tire will actually rut out, sink in. That can be really dangerous in a takeoff or landing scenario, because one tire might rut differently than the other, which could pull the airplane off the runway one way or the other. The Kodiak tires were certified to a lower PSI, so it will actually float on top of a soft type surface. So again, just the Kodiak was designed from the ground up to be a modern day bush plane. So even things like the tire PSI is designed for that type of mission. So how the Kodiak, I talk a lot about the modern day bush plane, and it's great if you're flying into Papua New Guinea or Amazon and the Amazon. But for instance, here we're in Texas tonight, and we're here at a gentleman's 600-acre ranch. He lives about an hour-and-a-half drive from DFW Airport, or one of the major, Dallas Love Field or Fort Worth Meacham. What's great about the Kodiak and how this stuff translates to your everyday, maybe high net worth purchaser is the Kodiak can be supplemental lift. So you can never fly a jet into here, but maybe a customer might have a jet flying to and from, Dallas to Los Angeles or Dallas to New York, and they still have an hour-and-a-half drive to get back to their home out here in Northeast Texas. So the Kodiak can go to Love Field and in 11 minutes pick them up and land here at their 1,000-foot airstrip outside on their 600-acre ranch. It's all done obviously in very safe, luxurious configurations with the Kodiak. So a lot of people say, well, all the bush and STOL is great, but how does it benefit me as just a private pilot or owner-operator? And it has a lot of uses, and it's, a helicopter could do the same thing, but a helicopter is 3 times as expensive. So this is a more economical way to get to and from your back door without having to drive anywhere. So moving on, I wish when I told people this, the fairing wasn't here, but to continue on with the landing gear, what makes the Kodiak really specific is the wing and also the way the landing gear is designed. So if we took this fairing off, you can kind of visualize in here is a solid steel, what we call a solid steel trunnion. And you can see the rivet lines actually go up, and this is in line with the rear spar of the plane. So the wing, the strut, the landing gear is all connected, and it's all designed to be extremely robust. So there's no, you're not going to shear the landing gear off on a Kodiak. You're going to, it's always going to be there, which we believe is the safest scenario, is to always have your landing gear. You don't want one of them to, you know, after a hard landing, land and you're flying down the runway with only one wheel. So that all connects, and then in this solid steel trunnion, there's two carry-through tubes in here that are about a 3-inch steel tube that carries the gear through to the other side, and it's all interconnected. And then from here, there's about a 3-inch to a 2-inch tapering tube. So a lot of people say, well, how does the landing gear work? How does the shock absorption work? Well, this arm obviously flexes up. And what happens in here is when this arm flexes up, these arms flex down, and that's how you get your shock absorption in the landing gear. It's really stiff, but it's designed to go into the roughest terrain. It obviously has that 9-inch stump rating as well. So it's not the most, you're never going to have the softest landings in a Kodiak, but you can land just about anywhere, which I think is pretty cool. We also have inside, a lot of people ask, does a Kodiak, a fixed gear airplane, have a squatch switch, or what we call a weight on wheels switch, a WOW switch? And it does. It's actually part, so when the weight comes off the wheels, this part of the gear comes down, the interior comes, the weight comes off the interior carry-throughs, and that's how you get your weight on wheel switch working. That's how the airplane knows if it's in the air or if it's on the ground. Moving back, I'll just touch on the windows here. The cool thing about the Kodiak was it's a 10-place airplane, so a pilot plus 9 people. You can have different interior configurations, but in max configuration, you'll notice everybody has a window seat. And there's no 2 on one side, 1 person on the other. The windows is single aisle and two sets of seats. So the windows are also placed correctly for when you're sitting inside. Instead of having to bend your neck over and look out like that, you can just turn your head, and it's a great scenic tour platform. So again, all of this was purposely thought out from the ground up. There was no adaptation of the Kodiak being a scenic tour plane. We knew from the get-go it would be a very good scenic tour plane, and it was designed to do that. The other cool thing is you can fly the Kodiak at 70 or 80 knots if you really wanted to circle around something and look at it, which to fly an airplane with 10 people in it at 70 or 80 knots just doesn't feel right. But even at those speeds, you have a ton of margin. Working our way a little further back, a lot of people ask what these are for. This is part of the air conditioning system here. We have a rear evaporator for the rear passengers here. Moving up, obviously you have your new, this is a Series 2, so we have a Series 2 paint scheme on this Kodiak. The NACA duct up there on the dorsal fin, that is for fresh air intake. This is the ELT antenna, the big white antenna you see here. Moving a little bit further back, a lot of people wonder what these are for. These strakes are, you'll only see these on airplanes with a cargo pod or with floats. And basically what they do is there's a little low pressure system that's created back here in flight with the cargo pod. And these kind of reach out to grab the air. You'll see these on other airplanes, especially jets. Like if you look at a Learjet, they've got pretty big rear strakes. So they're pretty common. They just stand out a little bit more on the Kodiak. Moving back, you'll notice the vertical stabilizer and rudder are pretty big, and that is because we have a ton of horsepower in the front. We have 750 horsepower. A lot of people call us a short coupled airplane. That basically means from the tip to the tail is shorter than a normal airplane, if you will, and that's part of the need for the large vertical surface and large rudder is just to have that full control when you're full power on takeoff. The elevator and horizontal stabilizer, nothing great here. You'll notice it's pretty wide. So as the CG envelope of the airplane increases, the wider the horizontal surface has to be. So the Kodiak has obviously a very large CG envelope, so that's why this tail surface is so wide. Back here, I'll make note of the trims. So the Kodiak, being a modern airplane designed in 2000 or certified in 2007, the trims, all 3 trims, aileron, elevator, and rudder trim, are all fully electric. So there's no old manual gear levers that you have to move to do the trims. It's all nice electric switches. This is the elevator trim tab right here. Moving back, not a whole lot to see. You will notice there's VGs all over the plane. VGs are these little strakes right here. They help with slow speed and sometimes high speed flight. It basically grabs onto the air and sucks it back in. It's what part of what allows the Kodiak to be such a good slow speed, short takeoff and landing plane. Moving up here, we'll get to the back door. The cool thing about this door is it's the dimensions are 49¼ by 49¼ We did that on purpose because we knew people were going to load pallets or stretchers and other things. Typical size for a pallet is 40 by 48. So a pallet will slide right in. So the door is opens just like that. And one thing I like to point out is the Kodiak has a lot of simple, cool engineering things that are well thought out. One of these things is just with two little letdowns, I can let the door slide all the way down, and now I can get a stretcher or a pickup truck or a forklift right up into the plane, load a pallet, move it forward. So even though the Kodiak wasn't necessarily designed for cargo per se, it is a great cargo plane, especially if you have heavy cargo loads, because the Kodiak can nearly carry itself. The useful load and the empty weight are about the same. So if you theoretically, if you could put a Kodiak inside of here, it could take off. What the other nice thing about the way this door is designed, and what I personally like, is the simplicity of it. There's no mechanics, there's nothing to break. It's just a ball and joint type socket. And the Kodiak has, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these simple things because it was designed to operate in the bush. So mechanical and things tend to break apart, especially in high, hot, humid, salty environments. So just something simple like this is a great engineering way to fix this problem. Looking inside here, excuse the mess, but we have the Timberline interior. So I can flick the switch on right here, which is kind of neat. It's not quite dark enough out to need it, but this is the Timberline interior. This is our mid-level interior in our tan color. We have two color options with the Series 2. We have a tan and what we call a cool gray. The Timberline interior has upgraded seats. They're all forward-facing seats. They don't, the seat tracks run forward to back, so you can actually place the seats wherever you want, but once they're placed, they're fixed. So they don't recline or anything like that. But the Timberline seats are a bit nicer. We fly constantly with our executives 4 or 5 hours sometimes per flight. And a lot of our people tell us that they really enjoy these seats. They're very comfortable for long flights. I don't get to sit back here very often, so I'm not a good person to ask, but I've heard good things. We also have this carpet. I personally love the carpet because it snaps out. So what's so cool about that is I can snap the carpet out, take all the seats out, and within about 10-15 minutes I have a pickup truck. I can put it all back in 10 to 15 minutes, and now I have a pretty luxurious passenger transport. The other cool thing with these seats, and specifically our Tundra, so our lowest level interior, our commuter style interior, these seats fold up into a pancake. So when you take them out, they fold up pretty nicely, and they'll actually fit in the cargo pod. So you can take all the seats out, put them in the cargo pod, as I mentioned, take the carpet out, and now you don't even have to leave the seat somewhere. So you can take passengers one direction and take cargo, something like oil drums or cargo, back the other direction. So it's a multi-purpose workhorse that does everything pretty well. Here you can see the window placement. It's great for the seats. Every seat has a window. This airplane has the optional cargo pod option. I'll just open these right here. This is just extra storage, basically. It adds a lot of versatility to the plane because if you do fill the seats up with 10 people, this would be where you would store the luggage. So there's 3 compartments. There is a little bit of gap between each compartment, so I've seen people put fly fishing rods or skis or snowboards up on that. So they will fit. These fit golf bags really nicely. It's just all around with the cargo pod, it's a really versatile tool. And last but certainly not least is the cockpit. So the Kodiak has the Kodiak 100 Series 2 has the new G1000 NXI. I can quickly power it on. The great thing about the NXI is it is very fast to boot. It also has a ton of new features that the legacy G1000 doesn't have. But you'll notice even little refinements like the leather wrapped yoke here, that's been standard on every Kodiak from day one. So it's a pretty well refined and very safe, intuitive airplane. The G1000 also comes with the GFC 700 autopilot. So that autopilot has full go around, ESP, all the latest and greatest safety upgrades. So it really makes this a very capable all-weather airplane. So that's the Kodiak, and thanks to American Kodiak, our dealer for the South Central states, Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Nebraska. I'm sure I'm missing some in there, but anyway, if you guys are in that territory, give American Kodiak a call. And if you have any questions, go to questaircraft.com.